If your mind never truly rests, it's not because there is something wrong with you. It's because once something needed protection. Welcome to the Connection Catalyst podcast, episode number 4. I'm Karolina, the Connection Catalyst, as the name indicates. And today we're going to talk about Enneagram Intellectual Triad. In the previous episode, I was talking about the emotional triad 2, 3, 4. So this episode will be about 5, 6, and 7, the intellectual triad. And this is all about me, because as we know from 2 episodes ago, me as a 6 have a wing 5 and have a wing 7. So I display all of these traits that I'm going to talk about today, which is very, very exciting for me. So let's go into Enneagram number 5, the observer or the researcher or the investigator. There are different names for this type, but these are the people that are very logical. They need to understand the world from a logical standpoint. They analyze everything, yes and no. They filter everything through logic. And they have to organize everything in their mind because they want to feel competent, they want to feel capable, and they want to also feel self-sufficient. Because in unhealthy way, because obviously I'm talking about unhealthy traits a lot in here and generalizing as well, they want to understand the world so that don't feel overwhelmed by it, because they might go into the overwhelm. And they are afraid of being incapable, of being stupid, of being depleted, of being helpless, and of not knowing. They have a very mm, resistant relationship with confusion. They don't like confusion. They associate it with something painful. So they don't want to be also dependent on others, because oftentimes the 5 was actually hurt in the past. So they felt like they can't rely on other people. So they need to rely on themselves and on their internal world, especially the logical ones. So they might be suppressing their emotions for the sake of logical understanding. The 5 wing 6 would do that more so than the 5 wing 4, because the 4 is a very emotional Enneagram type. But also the logic might be the one that protects us from going into deep feelings that the 5 might not be able or doesn't have capacity to handle. So the essence of the Enneagram 5 is that they learn very early that the world requires for them more than they can really safely give. And they become very observant. In this case, they become withdrawn, as I mentioned before, and they might be detaching from everyone and everything. They are very analytical because the analysis of everything and the logical understanding is what gave them safety in childhood. And so they are very oriented towards knowledge and understanding. They are the researchers, the engineers, the people that are working in a very logical ways. And they don't really withdraw because they don't care, although it might seem like it, but it's because this gives them safety. And I love going into this analysis of the world with the 5s. My bestie is a 5, and sometimes when we chat for like 7 hours straight, just analyzing the mysteries of the universe or other things or psychology or the situations that happened before. So it's really, really cool. So the good traits of Enneagram 5, when the Enneagram 5 is a healthy ego, is they are very deep thinkers. They have very original minds. They can comprehend a lot of things at once. They are very objective. They can be calm. They are actually the only Enneagram type I've heard. I'm not sure if this is true, but so far I've observed that is actually capable of neutrality. They can be very neutral, which other types might struggle with. They are very perceptive, very insightful. They are capable of focusing on one topic really deeply, and they are capable of mastering this topic as well. There are these people that when you give them a topic and they are really into it, they spend like 8 hours just researching online, going into all these different articles and YouTube videos and everything. And they are very wise observers. They can see a lot of things as well. My bestie, when he wants to, for example, find a pair of pants, he would go to every single shop online that is available for him to find the exact product that he wants, which I don't really like doing it because I don't like doing research online, but they are the researchers of the world. So the research for them is actually easy. And, he could spend hours upon hours looking for perfect pants or looking for also, I don't know, the ring that he wants to buy or whatever. And it's just pretty funny because I would never do that. I mean, unless I really had to, but because I'm a 6-7, which we're going to discover about soon, I don't really like spending hours of my time researching, but they are really good at it and they don't actually mind it. So let's go into the shadow traits as well, shall we? So When the five is feeling unsafe, they can detach emotionally, they can isolate way too much, they can hoard things like time, money, resources, or information as well. And this can be also interlinked with being greedy, but also they might have difficulty expressing their needs or feelings to other people because, as I mentioned before, they might learn that other people are actually unsafe. So they might withdraw, and this is their strategy rather than engage with people. And they might have the fear of intimacy, generalizing, of course, especially if they are avoidantly attached. I'm going to be talking about attachment style later on the podcast. And they are scared that people will demand too much from them, especially emotionally. So they might not be connected to their own emotions, and therefore they might not have capacity to hold other people's emotions, and they might live way too much from the mind and way too little from the heart and from their emotional body. Their shadow limiting belief might be that they don't have really enough resources to handle things, and that people will deplete me somehow. They will want too much from me. And their fear is that they are not going to know. And because knowing gives them safety, they really want to know everything about each topic. Which means, for example, they don't like surprises oftentimes. And when they are going for a trip, they want to know everything, what's going to happen. They need to plan for it. They need to prepare. That links to the core emotion of fear, which in 5 displays as overthinking, preparing endlessly, as I mentioned before, and staying detached to avoid the feeling of overwhelm. And in relationships, this can look like, for example, being too much in your own space because you value independence, of course, you value personal space. But if you're too much in your own space, you're not actually really putting enough energy into the relationship that this requires. And they can struggle with emotional availability, as I mentioned before. They might show their love through knowledge and intellect rather than presence or care or other ways how love can be shown. They can be also deeply loyal in relationships. No, there are good traits as well, but they need a lot of alone time to regulate and to find safety within. So that might be quite challenging if you're not used to it in a relationship and you're with the 5 to give them a lot of space, because oftentimes, especially if unhealthy, 5 will require a lot of time on their own, because the 5 is oriented on the past. So their mind keeps replaying what happened so that they can prevent it from happening once again. That's why they can sometimes also be stuck in the old energies, kind of like the Enneagram 4, especially if you're a 5 wing 4, then you have traits both 5 and 4 that are past oriented. So you might be just over analyzing everything that happened. And that might be also displaying in your life as I can't let go of my ex for like a few years, right? But this time it's stemming from intellectually over analyzing rather than being so emotional about it as for type 4. If you're in a relationship with a type 5, it's also important that you know that they value independence and they really value when you respect their boundaries. Because as I said, they need alone time to process stuff within themselves. So if you don't give them enough space for that, they will feel like you don't respect them. So this is something to keep in mind if you want to be in a harmonious relationship with a 5. And now, how does 5 react in stress and in comfort? So let's look at the graph. When the type 5 feels overwhelmed or pressured or emotionally invaded, they move into the qualities of type 7 that are not very good. So, how this looks is their attention can be scattered, they can escape into all kinds of distractions like alcohol, weed, dancing, whatever, being with friends, and so on. They can feel restless, they can feel like they have chaos in their mind, they can not want to go into the depth, and they just want stimulation all the time, and they might avoid uncomfortable feelings for the sake of feeling just positive emotions, as the 7 really likes to do, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. On the other hand, in growth, when the type 5 feels safe and grounded and embodied, they can access the best qualities of type 8, which is the boss. So how this looks is they are confident in their action, they are very good leaders, they have clear boundaries, they communicate directly, and they can take up space without needing to apologize anyone, and they feel like they can actually engage in life without losing themselves. And the last thing that I want to mention about the 5 is that they belong to the Hornevian group of withdrawing types. That means that they feel like they need to pull back to preserve their energy and to preserve their autonomy as well. So in type 5, how it shows up is that they observe first before engaging. That's why they might be quite quiet. If you see a 5 in social group, they are usually the ones that just sit in the corner and say nothing. But when they say something, it's really on point. And 5s are actually really funny oftentimes. They are quite sarcastic and quite cynic because they are so smart, so they can tell a lot of jokes. But coming back to this withdrawing topic, they can withdraw to feel safe, as I mentioned before, but they can also withdraw to protect their inner resources because they feel some kind of scarcity around them, or they feel that people will abuse their resources or they will require too much from them. So that's why some people don't understand the 5s and they perceive them as, I don't know, sometimes socially awkward, especially if it's 5 wing 4, and 4 oftentimes has a social anxiety as well. So these people might be quite on the side in the social situations and they might be misjudged. And especially when they have a wing 4, which doesn't like to be misunderstood, they might have problems of being understood because they say so little and then people can't really get to know them because they are so withdrawn, because they keep their distance. And it takes them so long to build trust and to open up to people. I mean, I'm generalizing here, remember, that it's hard for them to actually deeply connect with someone quickly. And that's why people are also distanced from them. So the areas of development for a 5 is to connect to their body and to their emotions and to feel the trust that the body can tell you the truth, and also to take action before feeling ready, because 5s can plan and prepare for ages and then they don't really take required action that is needed in the moment. When it comes to the wings, 5 wing 4 will be much more emotional and connected to his or her body, and 5 wing 6 will be much more intellectual. So especially for 5 wing 6, the area of development is to connect more and more to their emotions. All right, enough about 5s. Let's go to the 6, shall we? This is my Enneagram, so I'm super excited to tell you about it. Type 6, the loyalist, or in other words, the guardian. Our core motivation is to stay safe because we have a lot of fear inside. We are the most anxious and fear based of all Enneagram because if you look at the graph, you see that the 6 is in between 5 and 7, and all of these three types are fear based. That means that a 6 will have the most fear of all the 9 types, and we want to feel secure and safe and supported in the world. And we are really scared to be without the support or without the guidance, being unsafe, being abandoned, being unable to handle danger by ourselves. And we really want to find someone that we can trust, some reliable source of information, the authority, the teacher, the partner, the parent, or whatever it is. But we really are craving someone to lead us. Of course, if it's a healthy 6, it doesn't work like that. But I'm telling about unhealthy patterns of a 6 right now. So we learned very early in our life that life is unpredictable. I can't trust it. I need to still stay alert, and I need to find all the things that can make me feel unsafe. So we are constantly looking for danger, and we become very vigilant, very prepared. Also, we are the preppers of the world, especially the 6 wing 5. We are oriented towards risk assessment constantly. So we need to see, okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? We constantly question things in our mind. Is this safe? Can I trust this person? So we are the ones that actually have all these scenarios in our minds of what can go wrong, and believing in these worst case scenarios if we are unhealthy 6. But let's also talk about the good traits of a 6, okay? So first, we are super loyal, super trustworthy. We care, truly care about our friends and family, sometimes too much. Sometimes we put them even before ourselves. But okay, I'm going to talk about the shadow side later on. We are very devoted. We are reliable. We are accountable. We are very good problem solvers and troubleshooters, right? Because if we are constantly looking for the problems and what could go wrong, we can actually troubleshoot. We are able to foresee risks. We are usually courageous in the face of fear, although it depends of the kind of the 6 that I will talk about in a moment. And we are very protective over the people that we love. We are grounded when we are healthy. We are the guidance of the community, the glue of the network. That's why I call myself the connection catalyst. Because of the abandonment wound that we experienced in childhood, now we just want to connect and stay friends with everyone and just be loyal to everyone. So the shadow side of it can be that we self-sacrifice for other people. We always look for the authority beyond us, and we don't see that all the answers we have within. We always second guess ourselves. We doubt ourselves. We have difficulty trusting ourselves or other people as well, because how can we trust other people if we don't trust ourselves, right? We have catastrophic thinking of what could go really bad, as I mentioned before. We can project our fear onto the system or authority or situations in life and so on. We can test relationships based on like distrust that we have in our life, and we can oscillate between the obedience and rebellion, because we have a very peculiar relationship with authority. Usually we are subject to other people and what they say, but then it creates this split in ourselves, because in childhood there was one part that had to be obedient towards our parents and do as they say, but then at the same time there was one part that just wanted to be as they are, the rebel, right? Didn't want to do the things that parents told us to do. So that's why we have this split, and we can oscillate like a pendulum from being subject to other people and doing as they say to being completely rebellious towards it. And here we have this shadow belief as a six that we can't rely on ourselves, especially not on ourselves alone. So this can be very unhealthy in our relationships, because we can put too much weight, too much value, and too much meaning onto the other person. So for a six, the fear is displayed as worry, anxiety, or doubt, constantly second guessing ourselves. And it can show up also as overthinking, worst case scenarios, as I said, and also constantly seeking reassurance from the outside. And here we want to mention that there are these two distinctions between the phobic and counterphobic six. So these are two ways how the six copes with fear. The phobic six will be the one that hides in the corner because it's scared and is not going to go for the things that it's scared of, right? So moves away from fear and seeks reassurance and protection. And especially if it's six wing five, it's just withdrawn and avoids the danger. But counterphobic six, as I am, goes straight on towards the fear. So we're doing the things that we are scared of. So, for example, I was scared of skydiving. So, what did I do? Went skydiving. Or I'm scared to go and talk to someone. What do? Go and talk to this person, right? So, we actually challenge authority, and we appear sometimes confrontational because we are the risk takers, right? We are scared of something and then we go straight into it. So, the six, especially, can be very different when it's in its wings, because the wing five is going to be completely different than wing seven. Five is an observant and withdrawn and so on. Wing seven is out to the people, extrovert, looking for entertainment and so on. And the phobic and counterphobic six can be also very different. One can be super scared and never go out of the house because something wrong can happen. And one can be like, okay, I'm scared, so I'm gonna go out. So especially with the six, they can be confused with different types of Enneagram, because there are very different versions of six that you can encounter in your life. How we act in relationships as a six. We are super loyal, as I mentioned before. We seek commitment. We seek honesty. We also seek reassurance. We need to know multiple times, like, is it really true? Or are you really there for me? We test the relationship sometimes to confirm that we are safe. And we are very sensitive to inconsistency or unreliability. For example, if someone tells me I'm going to be there at this time, like, I'm very sensitive to when someone is late, for example. Or if someone is going to tell me I'm going to take you out on a date or go on a trip, like, I used to be way more sensitive than I am right now. But for me, to keep the word is very, very important. Also, for all the intellectual personalities, to keep the word, because the word is intellectual, is very important. More so than for emotional personalities that can just change what they do, even if they said something else, because they don't feel it anymore. Right? So that could be also something like a challenge for the relationship with someone with intellect-based and emotion-based personality, to just not understand each other and not be really compatible in this. So the communication here is key to understand each other very, very well. When we are in a relationship that we can really trust, once this trust is earned, we are very, very devoted as a six. And for me, it's important because, for example, in my case, it stems from my father in childhood telling me that he's gonna come and pick me up and do some cool shit with me, but then he didn't. So then I kept attracting these men that told me, okay, I'm gonna be friends with you forever. And then they just abandoned me, right? As my father left also for different family. And the six really likes to be in constant contact to feel safe. And also, we like to have rules because it's the loyalists. So we are loyal to our rules. For example, in the past, when I was a teenager, I had this rule that, okay, if you don't talk to me for 2 weeks, I can't call you my best friend. So I had kind of like rules or categories of how I label people in my life because the rules made me feel safe. And because we want to feel safe, we want things to be predictable, we like to also create these rules and these systems that can give us this safety. So if you are in a relationship with a person like me who is a six, you need to be dependable. We like things to be quite predictable, although I'm a wing seven, so we're going to talk about seven soon. So I like spontaneity as well. But we really like to be consistent in our love, in our expression, in our connection. And there is a reason why I call myself the connection catalyst, right? So now let's talk about how we act in stress and in relaxation. Let's look at the graph. When a type 6 feels pressured or insecure or afraid of abandonment, we move into the bad qualities, quote unquote, of type 3. So, how this looks, we can be overworking to prove our worth. I was like that. I was overworking at school to be the best always and to prove that I'm worthy of attention or love and stuff like that. We could chase validation. We could become very image conscious, care too much about what other people think about us. We can do instead of feel. We can suppress our fear through performance and through taking action all the time. So we have this fear that is disguised as competence. We want to be competent, right? So we are covering up this fear that we have internally with competence. On the other hand, in growth, in comfort, type 6 goes to type 9. So when the 6 feels safe, supported, internally anchored, centered, they can access the high qualities of the 9, which is the inner calm, the trust in the present moment, the regulation of emotions, reduced reactivity, and being more confident without being so vigilant as we always are. So we feel like we can relax and still be safe in this relaxation. We are very good mediators. We can see different perspectives of what people feel because the 9 is the mediator. So can kind of like zoom out from the situation and be empathetic towards all the people involved. So we can find the win-win scenarios quite well as well. And when it comes to the Hornavian group, the 6 is the compliant group together with 1 and 2. So the strategy is like, I do what's expected of me, right? So in this case, for a 6, we seek guidance. We do as people say. We align with trusted authority or trusted values. We can suppress our anger to maintain the security, especially in relationships. And we alternate between massive loyalty and resistance to whatever we are loyal to. As I said before, we might have this split between the rebel and the obedient person. And if you feel like you are a 6 and you have this split, you would benefit from doing the parts work. I'm going to talk about parts work further on in this podcast. So if you don't know how to do it, I will teach you. But we need to integrate both of these parts, the one that wants to be subject to other people and the one that wants to be rebelling them all the time. And I'm a big rebel. I love being rebellious, actually. Even if I just stay on the street and I see the red light and there is no car passing and I'm just walking on the red light, I feel so good about myself. I just like, breaking the law sometimes in a way that doesn't harm anyone or even doesn't harm myself. But there's just something about it, like the spark of being a rebel that I absolutely love. I will give you some examples from my life as a 6 of how these patterns might play out. For example, I might ask my ex about the same thing 3 times when I felt like I can't trust him. For example, he wanted to do something and I said, okay, don't do it. And then he said, okay, I'm not going to do it. And then I asked him once more whether he's not gonna do it, even though he already said that he's not gonna. But because of my trust issues, daddy issues from the past, abandonment wound, and so on, I needed to be reassured, sometimes twice or three times about the same thing, because I couldn't really trust. And because our internal trust is disrupted, because we don't trust ourselves, we might be gaslit in childhood, meaning that what we felt might be said by our parents or caregivers that is not true. So we just stop trusting ourselves. In my case, it was actually a very beautiful intention of my mom in childhood, where she didn't want to tell me that her and my father broke up. So rather than telling me, like, okay, we don't work as a relationship, because I was really young, I was like 2.5 years old, 3 years old, she was telling me that, okay, now your father lives with his mommy and you live with your mommy and I live with my mommy. So everyone just lives with their mommy. But I could feel that something is wrong. But my mom didn't want to make me feel worried. That's why she was telling me something else to kind of sugarcoat it. But it was unconscious gaslighting, because the truth was that shit was happening and it wasn't really cool. But she was telling me that everything is fine. So in this way, the child stops trusting themselves. So they feel intuitively that something is off, but then the parent is reassuring that everything is okay. So this is how our self-confidence in our own judgment of the situation gets like disrupted, even if the parent's intention might be super good, like my mother's, for example, right? So even though we might have an amazing upbringing, as I had, like I'm very happy about my childhood and so on, even though I had this abandonment wound from my father, my mom gave me everything that I needed to have a very beautiful life. Even then, we can have this trauma and we need to resolve it if we want to start trusting ourselves again. And here again, I recommend doing parts work with the part of us that doesn't trust and the part that can be trusted. Because oftentimes we have actually the part that is abandoned and the part that abandons the other part. So I'm going to talk about parts work more and give you examples of how I did it on myself and what I discovered as a six. So if you're curious, listen to the further episodes. So now let's go into my wing, which is the seven, the enthusiast, the most optimistic and positive Enneagram type, even though we suppress the negative shit and just brush it under the carpet and pretend it doesn't exist. But I'm gonna tell more about it soon. So the enthusiast's core motivation is to have fun, to have pleasure, to have entertainment, to really take the life to its fullest, to really be free and satisfied and fulfilled in life. We are very pleasure focused. That's why we like everything that is connected to the mouth. Singing, eating, smoking, drinking, just everything that gives us pleasure. And we oftentimes love to travel. But our core fear is to be trapped in pain. That's why we do all these positive things to avoid it. The core fears of the seven is to be trapped in pain. So what if this pain never ends? Or to be limited in some way, because we really value freedom. I say we because I have a wing seven. And we are scared of being limited and scared of being stuck in suffering forever. So we feel like we lack capacity, like we don't have capacity or don't have specific resources to deal with things. That's why we just suppress the shit out of all the negativity and we are so positive, and then we don't realize that we don't work with the negative emotions, but we have this coping mechanism of straight away finding the positive option and going towards it. In the past, I was like that. I didn't want to sit with my emotions. I didn't even see the value of spending time with myself. And I was suppressing the shit out of my stress. That's why I was an unhealthy achiever, because I was constantly stressed, constantly had to prove myself, because this wing seven that I had didn't allow me to go into my negativity, because I could just go out and smoke weed with my friends or go to the party or drink massive amounts of vodka over the weekend, right? Just to not feel the pain that I was holding within. So that's what sevens do. That's why they might be prone to all kinds of addictions like porn, like alcohol, like drugs. This is a personality that is very easy for them to do it, especially because they are so friends focused and family focused as well. So they like to fit to the group. So they might, for example, start smoking cigarettes just because it's a social thing to do. Even if they know it's unhealthy, they want to mold into the group. So they're going to just start doing it. And that connects to the fact that we love being entertained constantly. We have a FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Because we want to experience so many things. That's why we love multitasking as well. But we use the mind to manage our fear. So we focus logically on the next positive thing without realizing that this is just a cover up for the fear that we have inside. So we are projecting the mind forward to all the amazing things that we can still do in our life rather than sitting with ourselves and seeing, okay, what am I actually so anxious about? What am I scared that is going to happen if I am just present with myself? This is, in fact, our coping mechanism to be focused on the future. The time orientation is always of what is the next pleasant thing I can do, or how can I still fill my calendar with all these amazing things and friends and pleasures and possibilities and alternatives. And we actually escape our negative emotion by doing all these things. And that's why for a 7, it might be hard to finish the projects that we started because there is so many more exciting things to do. So they might be really into something, like let's say my brother started going into like acting. He did it for a few years, but then he got bored with it. He wanted to do something more exciting. So then he went into the rap music. He did it for a few years and now he quit it and he wants to do something else that is more exciting to him. So for a 7, the area of development is to stick to one thing that you're gonna do because you have all these amazing ideas as a 7. You're so creative. You see the future. You see all these visions. You're a very big visionary. You want to do all these things at once. But if you're not consistent and if you don't stick to one thing, you might not do anything really. You might never finish the things that you are supposed to do. So rather than constantly thinking, what's next? What's the next exciting or adventurous thing I can do? We might just stay present with ourselves and see, okay, what am I escaping from? What am I trying to get away from when I'm thinking about the next thing? And the future for us represents the relief, the pleasure, the freedom, the stimulation. So also it might be very expensive for a 7 to work with the feelings of dissatisfaction with the present moment that we might feel if we're not constantly stimulated by all these things that give us dopamine and another kick. And this is a very sneaky way for a 7 because they don't even see their own fear because they cover it up with busyness, with restlessness, with optimism, with excitement even. So it's harder to see because we are such positive people that, oh, where is this fear? I'm not afraid. I'm just busy, I just want to do all these amazing things. So we are moving away from pain by moving towards pleasure. That's why it's, I think, the hardest to see for a 7 all these suppressed things, especially fears that we have inside. If we want to grow as a 7, we need to learn how to stay present with the discomfort, how to hold space for other people's emotions as well, because as a 7, we are very sensitive. That's why we couldn't deal with all this negative shit, and we just tried to feel better by optimism, right? And doing all these pleasant things. So, okay, it's like not that bad, or I'll deal with that later, or maybe let's just focus on the positive things in life. And that's what the spirituality 1.0 does to us when we focus on all these things amazing and the law of attraction and positivity. But in this way, the positivity can be very toxic. So for a 7, there is this belief like, if I stay moving and doing all these pleasant things, I will be okay. But it's actually not true because we suppress the shit out of it and then this whole stress stays in my body. So unless we deal with this stress head on, we are gonna end up being unhappy. In relationships, the 7 can have a lot of joy and enthusiasm and also loyalty, especially as a wing 6, a lot of lightness and inspiration and laughter, but also can struggle with emotional depth because that might feel heavy. For example, can avoid conflicts or can not stay present during conflict, right? Feel restricted or limited by the relationship because we want this freedom all the time. So if the partner requires us to do something that we might not fully want to do if we were single, we might feel, okay, I may be better off by myself because it feels limiting and we hate limitation. And we might be uncomfortable sitting with someone else's pain, as I mentioned. And in this way, commitment can unconsciously feel like the loss of freedom. So this is a big area of development for a 7 to feel like I can be free while being in a relationship. So now, how does the 7 act in stress and in comfort? Let's look at the graph. When the 7 is under pressure, they become very rigid, very critical. They are very action-oriented in unhealthy way. They are perfectionistic because they become a 1, the perfectionist. They might be very easily irritated and morally rigid, and they feel like nothing is ever good enough when they go into the unhealthy one. On the other hand, in comfort, they become the observer. So that means that they can slow down, be really present, develop a lot of depth and focus. They can tolerate stillness. They don't have to do shit all the time. They can stay with the discomfort and they don't feel like they constantly need to do shit to be fulfilled. Looking at the Hornevian group, the 7 is the aggressive type. So it's like, how do I get what I want? What can I do to reach my next pleasant goal? How can I move toward what I want? How can I take up space? And of course, in this case, how can I avoid vulnerability by action, right? So they prefer also control over surrender in this case. They manage by doing, by planning, by moving, by expanding. And the area here for growth is like, okay, can I stay here, be present, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's painful, and still stay free and feel free? And for me, it feels like the sevens really like variety as well. Like I've been traveling for the last 13 years and I met a lot of sevens that also really love traveling because we like to meet various people, various cultures, because we want to live our life to the fullest. So we want to see everything that's available to us. And that connects to the multitasking because we love, for example, listening to the music and cleaning the house and doing something else at the same time. Because then we feel like, okay, this moment is like really full. But then we might actually struggle with patience or we might struggle with boredom, right? So we don't allow ourselves to just sit and be with ourselves. That's why we would really benefit from meditation, especially the silent one. But sometimes it's hard for us. So maybe we can go into like walking meditation or moving meditation like yoga. I will give you an example from my life how the sevens can act. For instance, there is a party and almost everyone is nearly asleep, but the sevens have a brilliant idea to go to the lake on the other side of the town and smoke weed there. So they are preparing, they are rolling the joint, they are going there. Then maybe they come back home at 5 and they still want to watch a funny YouTube video. They just really want to squeeze the lemon to the fullest, make such an amazing lemonade from this lemon that life gives them that is just like over the top. And I always laugh because if we in our group of friends have a lot of sevens and wing sevens, and we are always up for doing shit, and we are always picking up each other's jokes. We are always making up songs about everything, right? Because we are just really funny. We are the jokers, especially the 7 wing 6 is a joker. 7 wing 8 not as much, but we just love laughter and fun and joy. So you can recognize us pretty easily, the sevens and the wing sevens of the world, because we're going to be very optimistic and laughing all the freaking time. So I already spoke a lot about the intellectual triad. I will maybe speak more about the Enneagram generally in the further episodes, giving you better examples of the relationships and how these relationships can play out in our life between different types. But for now, I will end it here. If you feel like you are a type 5, 6, or 7, let me know in the comments. And remember that not everything might resonate with you, but just some traits that I mentioned of these types. And if you have any questions to me, please don't hesitate to contact me. There are links below the YouTube and Spotify. And also, you can find my website, karolinakuraj.com, karolina.kuraj.com. Thank you so much for being here with me and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.